Welcome to the 1455 Authors Series, a virtual portal into the minds of writers that explores their latest work, inspirations, and more. My name is Shanta Lee Honeycutt, and I'm here with you today to share work from my fifth book and latest work, Do Words Dream Themselves into Silence Told in Riddles, featuring Goonfucker. I'm going to be reading a couple of pieces out of this latest work. You can't report what's gone missing if you've handed it over. The corpse eater. They look like people. They sleep in beds. They sometimes corpse eaters. Robber bridegrooms, a slick talk gang of thieves with caves that are whole wombs, stomachs cradling undigested rot. Want bloomed on the tongue, baby. Severing, dismembering, a subtle art. The best thief can snatch, trespass with no protest. A corpse eater starts through the eyes, a slow, steady, studied seduction, maintained by how they say, how they fed, how they've observed. Pieces go missing with touch, your tongue, your language, gone with open space as cauldron. Your body fit in the in-between space of betwixt and exchange. All exchange rates have prices. And printed scent, the butcher isn't always the one holding the cleaver. How to be an Amish country. It starts with looking for an Amish quilt, a belated housewarming gift during a graduation. Journey away from the signs that promise Amish experience. Keep driving and worry about going in the wrong direction because the strip mall, it goes and watch the subtle change of the landscape. A lush green field not left alone, attended to by a body using tools of the old country. Forget that you were worried. Forget that you don't realize you no longer see restaurants, stores. Something is different. A woman tends to her garden, the thick fabric of her skirt daring to kiss the ground. She moves like it's not 95 degrees with high humidity outside. The stops here are inevitable because an Amish quilt. It's one of a kind. Small folksy signs guide the stops and starts. The one house with the 2 women and 3 children. One tends the laundry, and another waves one of you over, while the other takes you and your friend into the modest garage with all the quilts. Because options must be weighed, the drive continues. The heads of men, sometimes covered in straw hats, sometimes covered in rounded brims of black felt flat tops met with thick whiskers, suspended chests held by black straps and white cotton. It's the last house where the Dutch is thick, where what they have is the more than quilts. It's this home surrounded by summer heat that is thickened with the powwow, and the car that brought you here is the only thing that announces the year. It's sometime in the 2020s. Let your friend be the one to go carefully look at the quilts. You will look at the other wares. Notice the tools that are being used in the garden. Analog. Of this, a homestead is made. The furniture and heavy wood join in to speak of the way it's been here longer than the car parked outside, longer than all of the lives contained within it were ever a mistake or life-planned thought. The wood floors, absence of creaking, chime in. They put you in your place to remind you that they were here longer than your birth, your mama's birth, and your mama's mama's birth. They give permission to the walls and handmade everything to tell you to shut up about hunger. They whisper, none of it feeds you like this. If the fridge dared to hum, it was low. No buzz of modernity causing ears to ring. But don't just take the quilt. Take pieces of the dialect you don't understand with questions. How does that hold against the not so far out there? Your body will long to feel the weight of the fabric hanging off of your body with the bonnet in the 95-degree high humidity weather. The tongue wonders if it too can bend to the dialect not past and past and past. A hand vibrates under a steering wheel that vibrates with the tires meeting the ground that stretches towards the nearest strip mall. A finger twitches, wishing it snapped the old man leaning against his garage, pipe in hand, and an unapologetic stare steadied under the rounded felt flat hat. His body framed by white barn doors with a wagon just beyond, and the things only caught by the shutter that has no button or ready replay. It's here, at this stoplight just ahead, you replay the way a shadow dodged sunlight lighting the kitchen floor in the last house. In the last house, a pair of feet from outside stayed in place. What were you staring at? Why were you so still? Edges of black felt flat brim, no whiskers yet, but black suspenders against white cotton, holding adolescent curiosity caught within the eye of the outside world. And yet, no hairs announced that you were being watched. Is this what calm does? It was here in the valley of the growing strip mall, a sadness that a certain truth is remembered. Some images were never meant to be captured. And the trespass spaces within the Ephrata cloister, and the wooden blocks they used in place of pillows, and the saliva that grows on my tongue. Could I? I'll use the example of this book to talk about process. And if you see me looking down occasionally, I'm just looking at notes to answer these questions. So, this book's precursor was a chapbook. The chapbook was This is How They Teach You How to Want It, The Slaughter, a field guide for the hunted, the hunter, the dead alive, the live dead ones, the and this really started with an idea, my fascination with the concept of the wild hunt, which is out of German folklore. The idea that there are these ghost figures or wraiths that are hunting something, or they are just a spectral procession. And I started thinking about what is our relationship to each other in terms of power dynamics. What is our relationship to other things in the natural world that we claim to have power over? And in practice, I thought of this as a long poem that was going to be a triptych, the concept of the fevered feral. And that was fed by my love of Toni Morrison. So within her book, Jazz, and I want to say it's in the center somewhere thereabouts in the book, we encounter a character. I would call her definitely a fevered feral. I think she goes by the name of Wild. And there's another character who encounters her and just falls for her. And something about that image of a woman who is feral and just minding her own business really caught to me. And so originally it was going to be a triptych, then it became a chapbook, and that was in the fall of 2024. I knew I wanted to do a full collection, but I wanted to go beyond the exploration of the hunt. I wanted to think about the relationship between the real and the unreal, explore the uncanny in subtle ways, nuanced ways, but also out loud. Think about the psychological unrest that humans do best within themselves, especially when we're alone with our imaginations. Because it is a hybrid work of short stories, poetry, and illustrations, the question really became also about how would all of these elements be in conversation with each other. It wasn't, of course, as some of us know, just a matter of throwing it all together, but really thinking about where I would place the short stories, where I would place the poems in relationship to those short stories and what purpose the illustrations would be serving. One of my artistic practices has included dance. And so, also, when I think about process and when I think about words and writing, I do think about where they rest in the body, what kind of rest we're giving to the eye as people are taking in text. So I like to give a lot of thought to that as I'm crafting my manuscripts. This contrasts from other works in the sense that I wanted to try to shed identity. I wanted to go into exploring the nuances of the brain existing in a black box and having experiences. Also, thinking about, how do we determine what is real and what is not real? And is the human body a thing that we're trying to escape from? With Black Metamorphosis, which was my second full collection, for example, the focus was on being in conversation with Ovid, interpreting and interrogating those Greek myths and metamorphosis. Here I wanted to explore going beyond the edges of what we think we perceive as humans. And the wild card in this collection, I'd be remiss in not including, is the trickster element, Goonfucker, who adds another layer of voice. And to be honest, I'm still trying to make sense of all the ways that Goonfucker's voice adds other layers to this collection. It really varies, and it depends on the surround of my life. Often, when I've seen some talk about process, it doesn't include the real of life itself. And in one rare experience, I did talk to a writer, Maroa Yajidi, and she was one of the few writers actually. And her excerpt and the interview I did with her for Sign and Breath that I co-edited with Philip Brady for Etruscan Press. She talked about the commingling of process and everyday life, which I appreciated and admired. So I'm going to pull a page out of Maroa's book and answer this question by saying, in between laundry, in between cleaning, in between running to the grocery store or dinners or all sorts of things. And certainly I'm not the one and the only one in the household doing this. I have a great partner, great husband who helps with this. But as we're all juggling life in between my work, my process involves trying to carry a notebook. Now, the problem with that is I have a notebook for every project. I try to even dedicate a notebook to a specific book that I'm working on, or if I'm curating, I try to give a notebook specifically to that. Sometimes, though, it's not quite as elegant. Sometimes it involves writing on a piece of a paper napkin. Sometimes it involves writing on the back of receipts. Sometimes it involves ripping a paper bag and taking a note. And voice notes. Voice notes are my friend. Also, because I work across different mediums, I work with film, I work in photography, I do exhibition curation, and work across the different genres. If I'm not able to get to that specific notebook, it's very important that if I'm writing a note on a piece of paper or making a voice note, I say or title it for whatever project it's going to be attached to. In terms of a block, writer's block, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Even though I did discover that sometimes there's certain things of my craft or writing that will go missing. So when I find that I'm overflowing with correcting student papers, I don't want anything to do with the written word of my own. So I tend to lean on orality. I tend to lean on, using sound or my voice in a different way. So in those moments, I find that I either want to engage more with silence or images or something else that goes beyond words until I feel like I actually have the space to engage with words. I don't have just one inspiration. One of the many things I love to tell my students is, if you're a poet, that doesn't mean you should just read poetry. If you write fiction, that doesn't mean just read fiction, but actually engage with everything that you can take in and see what and how that feeds your work. For me, um, Maya Deren, who's a filmmaker and a dancer, many decades ago. I've been inspired by her because she didn't engage in Hollywood's gaze to make her short films. She just did her art and she did it in her way. And actually, her work inspired the work of David Lynch. I'll get to him in a second. Um, from Maya Deren, I take the idea of not seeking validation from the people and places that many in the writing community, or I should say, even in the aspiring writing or aspiring creative community, may view as deities. I also have been inspired by Carrie Mae Weems, her Kitchen Table series, for the very fact that she engaged herself. I think one of the quotes that I remember reading about this series is she was available. She didn't have to worry about scheduling. So that's how the series came about. One of the many reasons or inspirations for the series. David Lynch, and just a lot of cinema from around the world, especially for the expanse of the different ways that storytelling can exist. And, in celebration of the nonlinear. My love of the word started with Emily Dickinson, the way that she was dedicated to her craft, and also a reminder that you do not need permission to be prolific. Most times, what inspires me can be a phrase from a conversation. I've had a zigzag approach to my literary career, and I'm thankful for that. Um, so, just a little bit of background about me. I created two academic mentoring programs that were meant to prevent dropout rates of high school students. And it was mentoring middle school students and providing them with college mentors. I did that position, I would say, for about 3 years. And those two programs went on to last for just over 20 years after I left. But along along in the background was my writing. Initially starting just writing in my journal. So how I'm gonna approach answering this question is also in answering the question about literary community. I teach writing to others, and I also carry the practice of being a good creative and literary citizen. Um, and what that means for me, when I'm wearing my journalism hat, I really enjoy talking to other creatives. I enjoy talking to other writers. I enjoy doing reviews or critiques of work. It's my way also of celebrating and supporting the work that's out there and helping to honestly support the careers of others who are also trying to get their work out into the world. Um, Additionally, as it relates to my career, whether it is my writing or my visual work, my development has included remaining flexible and open minded. I've used my writing and voice skills, for example, to add to parts of Vermont's African American Heritage Trail and make it more accessible by making voice clips for parts of the historic sites along that trail. Some of my favorite experiences within my work has involved working with museums, writing about the items within their collection, but also doing writing and exploration through my curatorial practice. So I would say those are some of the ways that I've really found myself thinking outside the box in terms of my literary career. Oh, goodness. Community and being a literary citizen. Well, I talked a little bit about being a literary citizen in the previous question. But what I will add is that it's very key to be unselfish. If you have the opportunity to walk through a door, then I feel like it is your responsibility to hold that door open for someone else, or I often say bust out a window, not literally, but figuratively. Because if you are fortunate enough to be around a table or even build your own table, however you're doing it in terms of putting out any creative work, then you also have a responsibility to others to be unselfish. If someone approaches and has a question about a connection or how you did something, you don't have to hold it as if you are guarding a map to treasure, right? I think it's very important to be unselfish. Also, I find the question about community a bit complicated for me these days. Um, I see a lot of, I'm not even going to call it's not conversation, but commentary. Either people are judging work that is being put out, or there's this business of bullying. It's such a catch 22 because we do need others or require others. There is a midwifery that does require bringing work into the world, and boy oh boy does it, ranging from editors to publishers, all my amazing publishers that I've had the good fortune of working with, and so then all the editors I've had the good fortune of working with, so it it's key to understand what you say, need, and wish to utter outside of the noise. And by outside of the noise, what I mean is outside of the noise of all the chatter within community, especially within any of the creative communities and specifically the writing community. So it's a balance. The concept of creative community can often feel like the chosen cool kids who are the current gatekeepers. I'm still very much defining what community means. Literary success is constantly shifting for me, and it boils down to one thing: that original awe or feeling that I was able to have a book published, which is huge. I'll share a story from 2022. I walked into a Barnes and Noble, and I just happened to be in that area, wanted to stop. That happened to be the bookstore available. I walked in, and there was something about it that really occurred in terms of thinking about all the authors that used to be read that are no longer read, all of the authors that people may not be aware of who are hiding out on those bookshelves, and just the sheer wonder of the endurance of the word itself. And so I don't want to forget that original wonder of, wow, I got a book. I was able to publish a book. That's a really big deal. Or I was able to share work with others. You don't need permission to be prolific, especially with everything that's available right now. You also do not need permission to have your legacy, to define that for yourself, to develop your archive. That can be anything you want it to be. Shut out the noise of what you think the writing life looks like. Not everyone has the luxury of having dedicated space to run off to a retreat. Some of us cannot afford to be away somewhere for a month. Some of us don't live in spaces where you have dedicated studio and a fancy layout where your work can just breathe or exist on a surface. Sometimes you're playing Tetris with that. So I want to just say, give yourself permission to not have a what it should look like. There's a story about Stephen King when he first started out writing, I guess using like one of his children's Fisher Price desks or something like that. I'm forgetting where I read this. But, you know, in the beginning, writing life didn't look so shiny for him either. So I just want to encourage, you know, don't wait until it looks a certain way. Also, don't believe the filters that you see on social media. Everyone's life, and including the people who are portraying it that way, doesn't look like that. You know, don't forget the original awe of engaging with the word. I think that it can be very easy, even for some who they're on their eighth book or ninth book or 10th book or project. It's easy to think about, well, I want more, or these books didn't do what I want this one to do, or I'm looking for a screenplay. I want this adapted in this way. Um, you know, you have to remember that it's already a win that you get to do that. You get to put your work out there. You have that opportunity. And I think that in this strive drive culture, it is so easy to forget that. Also remember that, and not to compare, but there are many, maybe people who are right around you, who they have a fantasy or dream of putting work out and they may be too afraid to try. And just celebrate the fact that you are actually attempting it. Be unafraid to think about work beyond the page. Go beyond the page. Ask yourself, what other forms could this work take? Does it take a form through movement? Can it take a form through visual? Can it take a form if you were to do a call and response with someone? I apologize also in advance. Life is happening outside of this window, and this isn't a studio. So I just want to give you that heads up if you've heard any noises. I apologize for that. Last and not least, play. I don't mean in the jargon way that people want to package and rediscover play all of a sudden as if it went somewhere. Enjoy, play. For me, play looks like abandoned landscapes and buildings. Yes, they're illegal, but you get my drift. Engage and play and laugh. Laugh whenever, however you can, because you know it's way too easy to fall into the trap of taking yourself seriously, especially when you say I'm a writer. You know, you need some levity and you need balance. And with that, I hope it's helpful.